What if the biggest threat from AI isn't some sudden robot uprising, but a much more subtle and familiar problem, growing up too fast? Today, we're diving into that very idea. Welcome to Future Forward, AIAGIASI, the podcast exploring the evolving landscape of technology and its impact on society. I'm your host, and today we're tackling a fascinating question. Is AI going through adolescence? We'll be unpacking that metaphor framed by Dario Amodei, exploring its strengths, and also poking at its potential weaknesses. Great to be here. I think the adolescence of AI is a really compelling framing by Dario, because it avoids both the breathless hype and the doom and gloom scenarios. He suggests we're at a critical stage, but not necessarily facing an inevitable outcome. So let's jump right in. What does it even mean to say that AI is in its adolescence? Well, the core idea is that AI systems have developed rapidly in terms of raw capabilities. Think of a teenager's growth spurt. But they haven't yet developed the judgment, the institutional alignment, or the social maturity to handle those capabilities responsibly. It's like giving a 16-year-old the keys to a sports car. Now that's a vivid analogy. So we're talking about a mismatch between technical prowess and ethical or governance readiness, you might ask. Well, exactly. We see incredible advances in AI's ability to generate text, images, and even code. But the frameworks for ensuring these technologies are used safely and equitably are lagging far behind, and that makes sense. So, what are some of the key strengths of Dario's adolescence framing? I think one of its biggest strengths is that he rejects binary thinking. It's not about AI being inherently good or evil. He acknowledges that technology is powerful, but still under development. He also focuses our attention on what I'd call institutional lag, that the gap between the pace of technological advancement and the ability of our institutions, governments, regulatory bodies, even companies themselves to adapt and create appropriate guardrails. So it's not just about the technology itself, but about our ability to manage it effectively. That brings up an interesting question. What are some of the assumptions embedded in Dario's adolescence metaphor? One key assumption is that the actors involved are fundamentally responsible and well-intentioned. It assumes that AI systems will eventually mature and that competitive pressures will remain manageable. But are those assumptions realistic? That's where things get tricky. The tech world isn't always known for its restraint or altruism. What happens when market incentives or geopolitical rivalries come into play? Think about the incentives for companies to release increasingly powerful AI models as quickly as possible, even if the safety implications aren't fully understood. Or consider the potential for nations to weaponize AI in ways that destabilize international relations. The adolescence metaphor might downplay those darker possibilities. It almost sounds like the metaphor, while helpful, might be a bit too optimistic. It paints a picture of a teenager who's just a little clumsy and needs guidance rather than a potentially reckless actor driven by powerful impulses. And it connects to another concern. Dario's metaphor doesn't fully address the issue of power. Who controls these AI systems? Who benefits from their development? And who bears the risks? Adolescence is often a time when power dynamics become entrenched, right? Think about social hierarchies in schools or the ways teenagers navigate family relationships. So if AI is indeed in adolescence, then the norms and incentives that are established now will likely shape its future trajectory. This phase represents a narrowing window for institutional intervention. So let's zoom out for a second. How does this adolescence of AI's idea relate to broader concerns about artificial general intelligence, or AGI, and artificial superintelligence, or ASI? Well, if we believe AI is in adolescence, then the path we set during this phase will heavily influence what AGI and ASI eventually look like. If we allow unchecked power concentration and reckless development now, we risk creating AGI and ASI systems that reflect those same values. So the adolescence phase that Dario refers to isn't just a temporary blip. It's a formative period that could have lasting consequences. It's like saying that the habits and values you learn as a teenager tend to stick with you for life. That's why it's so important to address the ethical and governance challenges of AI now, while we still have a chance to shape its development. This all brings us back to the core idea that we're in a critical window of opportunity. To reiterate, we're not talking about AI as some distant, abstract threat. We're talking about a technology that's rapidly evolving right now, and whose future depends on the choices we make today. And it's easy to get caught up in the technical wizardry and forget the human element. But ultimately, AI is a tool, and like any tool, it can be used for good or ill. It reflects the values and priorities of its creators and deployers. Speaking of values, we should be curious about the role of moral considerations in all of this. How does the adolescence framing help us think about the ethical dimensions of AI? Well, one of the strengths of the adolescence metaphor is that it invites us to take a morally serious approach to AI without resorting to what some call performative ethics, that is, empty gestures that don't really address the underlying issues. It forces us to grapple with the real-world consequences of our choices. Think about companies that issue lofty ethical guidelines for AI development, but then fail to adequately address issues like bias in training data or the potential for misuse of their technologies. It's like a teenager who promises to be responsible, but then consistently makes bad decisions. So it's about aligning words with actions and ensuring that ethical considerations are actually baked into the development process, not just tacked on as an afterthought. And it requires a willingness to confront uncomfortable truths about the potential harms of AI and to prioritize safety and equity over short-term profits or competitive advantages. Earlier I mentioned the importance of institutional intervention. Let's look at what that would look like in practice. It could take many forms. Governments could establish regulatory frameworks for AI development and deployment, similar to what we have for other high-risk technologies like pharmaceuticals or aviation. Companies could invest more in AI safety research and develop internal mechanisms for ethical oversight. And civil society organisations could play a watchdog role, holding both governments and companies accountable. You must be thinking, it sounds like a multifaceted approach is needed, with all stakeholders playing a role. And you'll be absolutely right. It requires a shift in mindset. We need to move away from the idea that AI development is solely the domain of technologists and recognise that it's a societal issue that demands broad participation and public debate. I also mentioned earlier that Dario's adolescence metaphor helps us situate AI risk within historical technological patterns rather than speculative extremes. Let me elaborate on that. The Adolescence of Technology framing encourages us to look at how societies have grappled with other transformative technologies in the past, things like the printing press, the automobile, or the internet. Each of these technologies brought immense benefits, but also created new challenges and risks that had to be managed. Think of it as learning from history and applying those lessons to the AI era context. For example, the advent of the printing press led to the spread of information and the rise of literacy, but it also created new opportunities for propaganda and censorship. Similarly, the internet has connected billions of people and enabled unprecedented access to knowledge, but it has also facilitated the spread of misinformation and hate speech. We can draw parallels to AI and anticipate similar challenges. It reminds us that technological progress is never a one-way street. There are always trade-offs and unintended consequences to consider. And by understanding those trade-offs, we can make more informed decisions about how to develop and deploy AI in a way that maximizes its benefits while minimizing its risks. To bring this full circle, let's return to Dario's idea that AI is in its adolescence. If that's the case, what's the ultimate goal? What does maturity look like for AI? Well, that's the million-dollar question, isn't it? I think maturity for AI would mean that these systems are aligned with human values, that they're governed by robust ethical frameworks, and that they're used in a way that benefits all of humanity, not just a privileged few. It's not just about technical sophistication, but about wisdom, responsibility, and a commitment to the common good. And getting there will require a collective effort, involving technologists, policymakers, ethicists, and citizens alike. It's a challenge we all have a stake in. As we start to wrap up, I wanted to revisit something I mentioned at the beginning, the idea that the adolescence of technology is a diagnosis, not a solution. Dario's framing of AI as being an adolescence helps us understand where we are now, in this critical moment. But it doesn't guarantee that we'll reach a positive outcome. Adolescence is a relatively brief period, and what follows is shaped by the choices we make under pressure. So it's a call to action, a reminder that we can't afford to be complacent. We need to seize this opportunity to guide AI's development in a responsible and ethical direction. The future is not predetermined. It's up to us to shape it. This has been a fascinating deep dive into Dario Amodei's AI forecast. To summarize the key takeaway, the idea that AI is in its adolescence offers a valuable framework for understanding the current state of the technology and the challenges we face. It highlights the mismatch between rapidly advancing capabilities and lagging governance structures, and it underscores the importance of making wise choices now to ensure a beneficial future for AI. And it's crucial to remember that this isn't just an abstract, theoretical debate. AI is already impacting our lives in countless ways, from the algorithms that curate our news feeds to the AI systems that are used in healthcare and criminal justice. The decisions we make about AI today will have real-world consequences for all of us. So as we look ahead, the big question is this: how can we ensure that AI grows up to be a responsible and beneficial member of society? What concrete steps can we take to guide its development in a way that aligns with our values and promotes the common good?